Welcome to another edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com. Today I'm joined by Michael Aamodt. He is a professor emeritus in the Department of Psychology at Radford University. He recently had a widely publicized study breaking down divorce rates by occupation. So we'll talk to him about the study, its findings, and what it means. So Michael, thanks for joining me.
Sure, Matt. Happy to be here.
Now, a lot of your research in your career focused on the personalities of law enforcement officers. So I'm curious as to the motivation behind conducting this type of study. Where did the idea come from to study divorce rates by occupation?
Sure. There have been a lot of myths that are out there around involving law enforcement personnel. For example, there was a myth that they had very high suicide rates. And a number of years ago, a student and myself went back and really looked at the suicide rates and found that they weren't any higher. We looked at their personalities and found out that their personalities are very normal personalities. And so there was another, what we thought might have been a myth, that law enforcement personnel had very high divorce rates. But there's really no research that investigated that. So Sean McCoy, who had been a student of mine, and I decided to take a look to see whether or not law enforcement had divorce rates that were abnormally high, and we found that they didn't. And kind of in the process, we developed a list of all the other divorce rates for other occupations, and that seemed to have caught a lot more attention than our actual intent of our study.
Sure. So what about those divorce rates? What professions seem to have the highest ones, and what professions had the lowest?
The ones that were the highest were ones that maybe aren't going to seem too surprising. Dancers and choreographers, for example, were very high. Massage therapists, bartenders, people who worked at casinos. So those were all the ones that were pretty high.
And in terms of lower divorce rates by profession?
Again, not too surprising. I think what you'd find is that a number of different types of engineers were low, clergy men were low, podiatrists were low. So a lot of the more scientific positions were lower, as well as ones that were involving agriculture.
So what type of conclusion are you able to draw from those numbers?
You know what, that's the tough question right now, because the key conclusion we wanted to look at really involved law enforcement. But the big question is, now that we've got this list of occupations and their divorce rates, why are the ones that are high so high, and why are the ones that are low so low? And from our study right now, we can't really answer that question, which is why we're in the process of working on some research right now to see if we can look at aspects of the job and aspects of the people that go into the jobs to see if we can narrow that down a little bit. From our study, we actually looked at a couple of things already, such as people who or occupations that require higher education and higher intelligence. They tend to have lower divorce rates. Those that, for example, that people are young tend to have higher divorce rates. But what we were surprised at is that jobs that did not have, or jobs that had involved a lot of shift work or weekend work, they were not necessarily any more likely to have higher divorce rates than the other jobs. So we're trying to take a look at some other aspects of those jobs and see what comes up. So
you are currently doing more research on why certain occupations do lead to divorce?
Yes, we sure are.
So
and we hope to have that completed within probably about 6 months or so.
And that'll look more at if it's the nature of the jobs that lead to divorce, or if it's the type of people more likely to get divorced are attracted to, those jobs.
Right. And right now, I think what we're expecting to find is that maybe a little bit more of the people that are heading into those jobs. Some things like I'd already mentioned, things like age and income, those are always related to divorce, even when you go outside of occupation. So I think we're going to see a lot of people aspects, and then we may see some about the work itself as well. I mean, one of the things we certainly want to look at is, with a job that's very dangerous, for example, is that going to have affect the divorce rates or not?
Sure. Finally, I was curious as to what surprised you most about this study that you did.
I guess what surprised us the most is the real differences in divorce rates. We expected to have some. But when you really look at the difference in divorce rates, let's say between a clergy member and a bartender, they're pretty extreme, and so I think I was a little bit surprised at the difference. Now, one thing I should probably point out is that we used census data, and census data really basically takes a snapshot in time and says, at this given point, what percent of bartenders, what percent of police officers are divorced. What we don't know, and this is one thing that we've had several law enforcement psychologists bring up, is that they think that at any one time the divorce rate for police may not be any different, but that they divorce much more often. So, for example, if we were able to survey people, it might be that law enforcement personnel have been divorced 3 times, where, let's say, somebody such as an engineer might have been divorced once or twice. But that's just not something we can tell from the census data. But that's a really interesting question.
Gotcha. Well, it was a fascinating research, and best of luck with your continued research into figuring out the reasons behind these certain occupations leading to high divorce rates, and definitely keep us apprised of that. We'd love to talk to you about it some more in the future.
Sure will.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us. That was Michael Aamodt, a professor emeritus in the Department of Psychology at Radford University. And that'll do it for this edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com.